Sometimes a single piece of jewelry holds more power than all the money in the world. Monica Williams had no idea that the silver pendant around her neck would change everything, not just her life, but the life of a millionaire who thought he knew his own family's darkest secrets. Before we go into details, click subscribe, like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're listening from. Let's begin. The crystal chandeliers of Meridian Club cast dancing shadows across the mahogany tables as Monica Williams balanced 3 plates of filet mignon on her left arm, her movements precise despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. 6 months of working double shifts had carved dark circles under her brown eyes, but she couldn't afford to slow down, not with Grandma Rose's medical bills piling up like autumn leaves. "Table 12 is still waiting for their appetizers," barked Sandra, the head server, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "And the gentleman at 7 wants his steak redone." "Again," Monica nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of another 16-hour day. The silk-draped dining room buzzed with the conversations of Atlanta's elite, oil executives, tech moguls, and society wives who spent more on a single dinner than Monica made in a month. She moved between their tables like a ghost, invisible until they needed something. Her fingers unconsciously touched the delicate silver pendant resting against her collarbone, her mother's final gift, worn every day for the past 12 years. The metal was warm against her skin, engraved with words that had puzzled her since childhood. Forever. June 15th, 5. Her mother had pressed it into her 16-year-old hands just days before the cancer took her, whispering, "This will keep you safe, baby girl. Promise me you'll never take it off." "Monica!" The sharp voice belonged to Mrs. Whitmore, a socialite whose Botox prevented any real expression. "This wine is completely wrong. I ordered the 2018 Bordeaux, not this cheap substitute." Monica glanced at the $300 bottle, hardly cheap by any normal standards. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll have the sommelier bring you the correct vintage immediately." "See that you do. And next time, perhaps pay attention instead of daydreaming." Heat flushed Monica's cheeks, but she maintained her professional smile. She'd learned long ago that responding would only make things worse. As she turned toward the wine cellar, her pendant caught the light, sending tiny silver reflections across the pristine tablecloth. 30 feet away, Benjamin Crawford sat alone at his usual corner table, barely touching his salmon while scrolling through acquisition reports on his tablet. At 34, he commanded a hospitality empire worth $800 million, yet the weight of success felt more like chains than freedom. The Meridian Club had been his sanctuary for 3 years, a place where he could disappear into numbers and strategies, far from his father's disapproving glare. Benjamin's steel-blue eyes tracked the efficient movements of the servers, his business mind automatically calculating profit margins and labor costs. His father had trained him to see everything as potential assets or liabilities, including people. It was a cold way to live, but it kept the family legacy intact. "Mr. Crawford?" The voice belonged to James, the club manager. "I wanted to personally ensure everything meets your expectations this evening." "Everything's fine, James." Benjamin's response was automatic, distracted. He'd been having the same nightmare for weeks. Flashes of a car crash from his childhood, screams that echoed through his sleep, and always that date. June 15th, 5. His father insisted it was just stress from the upcoming merger, but Benjamin couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was missing from his memories. The commotion at table 12 snapped his attention back to the present. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit had grabbed the wrist of the young black waitress, the same server Benjamin had noticed for her quiet grace and professional demeanor, despite the obvious exhaustion in her movements. "Maybe you should smile more, sweetheart," the man slurred, his grip tightening on Monica's wrist. "A pretty girl like you could make a lot more money with the right attitude." Monica's voice remained steady, despite the fear flickering in her eyes. "Sir, please release my wrist. I need to attend to other tables. I'm talking to you, girl. When a customer gives you advice, you listen." "She asked you to let go." Benjamin found himself standing, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Every conversation in the nearby vicinity fell silent, the weight of his presence commanding immediate attention. The man's face flushed red. "This doesn't concern you, Crawford." "Actually, it does." Benjamin's voice carried the quiet authority of inherited power. "This is harassment, and it's not tolerated here." Monica's eyes met Benjamin's for a brief moment, gratitude mixing with something else, a recognition that seemed to pierce through both their carefully constructed walls. But before anyone could say another word, James appeared with 2 security guards. "I think it's time for you to leave, Mr. Peterson," James said firmly. As the drunk patron was escorted out, still muttering complaints, Monica straightened her uniform with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered to Benjamin, but he'd already returned to his table, leaving her to wonder about the strange intensity in his gaze. The remainder of the evening passed in tense quiet. Monica completed her rounds with mechanical precision, hyper-aware of every glance, every whispered conversation. She'd seen too many servers fired for less than what had just happened. The job market was brutal, and she couldn't afford to lose this position, not with Grandma Rose's next chemotherapy treatment scheduled for Friday. At closing time, Monica was wiping down tables when James approached, his expression unreadable. "Monica, I need to see you in my office." Her heart sank. The pendant felt suddenly heavy against her chest as she followed him down the carpeted hallway, past photographs of the club's illustrious history. James closed the door behind them and gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know what happened earlier wasn't professional, but I didn't encourage—" "Monica!" James held up a hand, his tone gentler than expected. "What happened wasn't your fault, but there have been complaints." The word hit her like a physical blow. "Complaints about what?" "Your attitude. Some members feel you're standoffish, not as warm as they expect from our service staff. I'm professional with everyone. I do my job well. I know you work hard. But perception matters here. Our members expect a certain level of accommodation." James couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Monica, I have to let you go." The words seemed to echo from a great distance. Monica felt the room tilt slightly, the elegant office swimming before her eyes. "Please, Mr. James, I need this job. My grandmother is sick and I've already made the decision. Security will escort you out." 20 minutes later, Monica stood on the sidewalk outside Meridian Club, her final paycheck clutched in her trembling hands. The Atlanta night air was crisp with approaching winter, and the city lights blurred through her unshed tears. 6 months of 12-hour days, of swallowing pride and enduring condescension, all gone in an instant. She touched her pendant again, her mother's words echoing across the years. "This will keep you safe, baby girl." But safety felt like a luxury she couldn't afford as she walked toward the bus stop, each step carrying her further from the only steady income she'd known. Inside the club, Benjamin stared out the window at Monica's retreating figure, something nagging at the edges of his consciousness. He'd been watching when James delivered what was obviously devastating news, had seen the proud set of her shoulders crumble for just a moment before she gathered herself and walked out with her head held high. But it wasn't her dignity that had frozen him in place. It was the pendant around her neck, a flash of silver that had caught the lobby lights as she passed beneath them. The inscription had been too far away to read clearly, but the shape, the delicate chain, even the way it rested against her collarbone, seemed achingly familiar. June 15th, 5. The date from his nightmares, the missing piece of his childhood that his father had buried beneath layers of corporate success and family respectability. Benjamin's hand moved unconsciously to his own chest, where a matching pendant had once hung. Before the accident, before everything changed, before his father taught him that some truths were too dangerous to remember. As Monica Williams disappeared into the Atlanta night, Benjamin Crawford felt the first crack in the wall of his carefully constructed life. Neither of them knew that this moment, this collision of two worlds, two secrets, two broken hearts, was about to change everything. The game of destiny had just begun, and the stakes were higher than either of them could imagine. What do you think? Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew was suddenly turned upside down? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The fluorescent lights of the unemployment office buzzed like angry wasps as Monica sat in the plastic chair, her number still 43 away from being called. 3 days had passed since Meridian Club, and the weight of her situation pressed down like a physical force. Her final paycheck wouldn't even cover half of Grandma Rose's medication, let alone the rent on their tiny apartment in East Atlanta. "Number 247, called the board clerk behind bulletproof glass. Monica checked her ticket again, 289. She shifted in the uncomfortable seat, her pendant catching on the cheap fabric of her interview blouse. The silver felt cold against her skin today, offering none of its usual comfort. Around her, dozens of other job seekers waited with the same mixture of desperation and fading hope that she felt gnawing at her insides. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Rose. "Baby, don't worry about the pills. I'm feeling stronger today anyway. Love you." Monica's throat tightened. Rose had been saying that for weeks, pretending the cancer wasn't winning, pretending she didn't need the expensive treatments that kept her alive. At 73, her grandmother was the only family Monica had left, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, who'd worked 3 jobs to put Monica through community college before her own diagnosis changed everything. "Next," called another voice. Monica looked up to see a young caseworker gesturing her forward to a cramped cubicle. The nameplate read, Keisha Washington. "What kind of work experience do you have?" Keisha asked, fingers poised over her keyboard. 6 years in food service, most recently at Meridian Club. Monica tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Before that, I worked at 2 other restaurants while taking classes." "Any reason for leaving your last position?" The words stuck in Monica's throat. How could she explain that standing up for herself was considered bad attitude in their world? "Personality conflict with management." Keisha's expression softened. She'd clearly heard that phrase before. "I'll see what we have available, but most restaurant positions require references from your last employer." Monica's heart sank. James would never give her a positive reference, not after the circumstances of her firing. She was trapped in a circle of failure that seemed impossible to break. Meanwhile, across town in his penthouse office overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Benjamin Crawford stared at the computer screen displaying the personnel files from Meridian Club. He'd used his influence to access them, telling himself it was routine business oversight. But his eyes kept returning to one name, Monica Williams. The file was sparse. Employment history, emergency contact listing a Rose Williams as grandmother, address in a neighborhood Benjamin had never visited. No photo, no personal details that might explain why her pendant had triggered something deep in his memory. But it was the date of her mother's death that made his blood run cold, June 16th, 5, one day after the date from his nightmares. "Mr. Crawford," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your father is here for your lunch meeting." Benjamin quickly closed the file as William Crawford entered, his presence filling the room like an expensive cologne. At 68, the patriarch of Crawford Industries still commanded every space he entered, his silver hair perfectly styled, his suit tailored to hide the slight stoop age had given his shoulders. "You look tired, son," William said, settling into the leather chair across from Benjamin's desk. "The Peterson situation at the club has been handled, I trust." "Peterson situation? The drunk who bothered that waitress. He's been permanently banned from all our properties." William's pale blue eyes, so similar to Benjamin's, studied his son carefully. "Though I hear the girl was terminated anyway, probably for the best. These service people need to understand their place." Something cold twisted in Benjamin's stomach. "You had her fired." "I had James maintain the club's standards. One incident like that can spiral into accusations, lawsuits, bad publicity. Better to cut ties cleanly." William leaned forward. "You seem unusually interested in a terminated employee." Benjamin forced his expression to remain neutral. "Just business curiosity." "Good. Speaking of business, the Hartwell merger needs your full attention. I don't want any distractions." William stood, straightening his tie. "These people, they come and go, Benjamin. Don't waste energy on things that don't matter to our bottom line." After his father left, Benjamin sat in the silence of his office, the city sprawling below him like a vast game board. But for the first time in his life, he questioned whether he was playing for the right side. That evening, Monica walked the familiar streets of her neighborhood, job applications clutched in her hand like losing lottery tickets. Every restaurant, every diner, every coffee shop had the same response. Not hiring, or they'd call if something opened up, or they needed someone with more experience. The pendant bounced gently against her chest with each step, a constant reminder of promises her mother couldn't keep. She turned onto her street, just as Mrs. Chen from the corner market waved her over. "Monica, honey, you have a minute?" Mrs. Chen had known Monica since she was a child, had often slipped her free candy when Rose was struggling to make ends meet. Now her weathered face creased with concern. "I heard about your job, baby. Times are hard, I know." She pressed a small envelope into Monica's hands. "It's not much, but maybe it helps with Rose's medicine." Monica's eyes burned with unshed tears. Inside the envelope were 3 $20 bills, probably Mrs. Chen's grocery money for the week. "I can't take this." "You take it. Rose helped my family when we first came here, remember? We don't forget." Mrs. Chen patted Monica's cheek with a gentle hand. "Good people always find their way, you'll see." As Monica climbed the stairs to her apartment, Mrs. Chen's words echoed in her mind. But good people seemed to finish last in her experience, while those with money and power could destroy lives with a phone call. She found Grandma Rose asleep in her chair, the television playing an old movie neither of them could afford to watch on anything but basic cable. Rose's medication bottles sat on the side table, most of them nearly empty. Monica counted the pills with practiced efficiency, enough for maybe 5 more days if they stretched the doses. She knelt beside her grandmother's chair, studying the face that had been her anchor for so many years. Rose's brown skin, once rich and smooth, now showed the grey pallor of illness. But even in sleep, she smiled slightly, as if holding on to some beautiful dream. Monica's pendant caught the light from the television, sending brief flashes across Rose's peaceful face. For a moment, she could almost hear her mother's voice again. "This will keep you safe, baby girl." But as she looked around their tiny apartment, at the overdue bills stacked on the kitchen counter, at the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her slowly dying in a second-hand chair, Monica wondered if some promises were simply impossible to keep. In his penthouse across town, Benjamin Crawford stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the lights of the city below. Somewhere in that maze of streets and dreams was a woman whose pendant held secrets that might unlock his own buried past. June 15th, 5. The date that haunted his sleep and now appeared in her file like a breadcrumb, leading back to a truth his father had spent decades hiding. As the night deepened around them both, neither Monica nor Benjamin knew that their lives were about to collide again, not in the rarefied air of exclusive clubs, but in the harsh reality of a world where justice and love sometimes required the courage to lose everything in order to gain what truly mattered. The catalyst had been set in motion, and there would be no going back. The pawn shop on Memorial Drive smelled like desperation and broken dreams. Monica stood before the bulletproof glass partition, her mother's pendant heavy in her palm as the clerk examined it through a magnifying glass. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows across his weathered face, making him look like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. "Silver's not worth much these days," he said, his voice muffled through the speaker. "Maybe $40, $50. Monica's heart clenched. "But it's antique. Look at the craftsmanship, the engraving." "Lady, I see 100 of these a week. Sentimental value don't pay the bills." He slid the pendant back through the slot. "Take it or leave it." Behind her, a line of other desperate souls waited their turn to trade memories for money. Monica's fingers closed around the pendant, her mother's final words echoing in her mind. "Promise me you'll never take it off." But promises couldn't buy Grandma Rose's chemotherapy. Promises couldn't keep the lights on or food on the table. "I need to think about it," she whispered, stuffing the pendant back into her purse. Outside, the October air bit through her thin jacket as she walked toward the bus stop. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from collection agencies and 1 voicemail from Rose's oncologist. Monica's hands shook as she dialed the number. "Miss Williams? Dr. Martinez here. I'm afraid we need to discuss your grandmother's treatment plan. Her insurance has denied coverage for the next round of chemotherapy, and without payment arrangements." The words faded into white noise. Monica sank onto a bus stop bench, watching cars full of people with jobs and health insurance stream past her. In the distance, the gleaming towers of downtown Atlanta mocked her with their promise of prosperity that seemed forever out of reach. 20 miles away, Benjamin Crawford sat in his private investigator's office in Buckhead, a manila folder spread across the desk between them. Marcus Thompson was a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate background checks, but today Benjamin had hired him for something far more personal. "The official records about June 15th 5 are interesting," Marcus said, adjusting his reading glasses. "There was a car accident that night on Highway 285, multiple fatalities. But here's what's strange. Your name appears in the initial police report, then disappears from all subsequent documentation." Benjamin's blood chilled. "What do you mean, disappears?" "Someone with serious influence scrubbed those records clean. I'm talking high-level intervention, the kind that costs major money and political favors." Marcus slid a photograph across the desk. "But I found this in a newspaper archive that wasn't digitized." The black and white image showed a mangled sedan wrapped around a concrete barrier. The headline read, "Family of 4 dies in highway crash." Benjamin stared at the faces in the accompanying photo, a young couple with 2 children, the youngest appearing to be about 4 years old. "The Williams family," Marcus continued, "Michael and Patricia Williams, along with their daughter Monica, age 16, and son," he paused, checking his notes, "son David, age 10. Monica was the sole survivor, found by first responders still wearing this." He produced a police evidence photo showing a silver pendant identical to the one Benjamin had seen around the waitress's neck. The engraving was clearly visible. "Forever, June 15th 5. The room seemed to tilt around Benjamin. "You're saying the waitress from Meridian Club is Monica Williams, the same girl who lost her family that night?" Marcus leaned forward. "But here's the million-dollar question. What were you doing there, and why did your father make sure it was erased from every official record?" Benjamin's hands trembled as fragments of memory began surfacing. The smell of rain on asphalt, screaming brakes, his own voice much younger crying for help, and through it all a girl's voice calling for her parents, her brother, anyone who might still be alive in the twisted wreckage. "I need to see that accident site," Benjamin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Already ahead of you." Marcus handed him an address. "The memorial is still there. Might help jog more memories." That evening, Monica returned to her apartment to find Grandma Rose sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through a shoebox of old photographs. The medication bottles beside her were nearly empty, but Rose's eyes held a clarity that had been absent for weeks. "Come sit with me, baby girl," Rose said, patting the chair beside her. "We need to talk." Monica recognized the photographs from her childhood, family barbecues, school plays, Christmas mornings when money was tight, but love was abundant. Rose's gnarled fingers stopped on a picture of Monica's parents at their wedding, both of them radiating joy and hope for the future. "Your mama was the strongest woman I ever knew," Rose said softly. "Even when the doctors told her about the cancer, she never stopped fighting. Right up until the end, she was making plans for your future." "Grandma, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Rose's voice carried an urgency that silenced Monica's protests. "She made me promise something, the night before she died. About that pendant you wear." Monica's hand instinctively moved to her throat. "What kind of promise?" Rose reached into the shoebox and withdrew a sealed envelope yellowed with age. Monica's name was written across the front in her mother's familiar handwriting. "She said to give you this when you needed answers more than comfort. I think that time is now." With trembling fingers, Monica opened the envelope and unfolded a letter dated just days before her mother's death. "My dearest Monica, if you're reading this, it means Rose has decided you're ready for the truth about that night. The accident wasn't random, baby. There was another car involved, a boy about your age who tried to help us. His family came to the hospital while you were unconscious, brought expensive doctors, paid for everything. But then they disappeared and I was told never to contact them again. The pendant isn't just a family heirloom. It's a witness to that night. Proof that we weren't alone on that highway. I pray you'll never need to use this knowledge, but if you do, remember that justice sometimes takes time to catch up with the truth. Your brother David didn't die in the crash. He was taken from the hospital while you were in surgery. I don't know where, but I never stopped believing he was alive somewhere. The pendant is your connection to him, to all of us. Don't let anyone convince you to give up that hope. Love always, Mama. The letter fluttered from Monica's numb fingers. The room spun around her as 23 years of carefully buried memories came rushing back. David, her baby brother with his gap-toothed grin and infectious laugh. The other car that had swerved to avoid hitting them, ending up in the ditch. The boy who'd held her hand while they waited for help, promising her that everything would be okay. "Did you know," Monica whispered, "about David?" Rose's eyes filled with tears. "I suspected. But your mama made me swear to let you heal first, to give you a chance at a normal life. I've been carrying this secret for 23 years, watching you struggle, wondering if I should have told you sooner." Monica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor. "All these years I could have been looking for him. He could be out there somewhere, and I've been—" "You've been surviving," Rose said firmly. "You were 16 years old, traumatized, and trying to rebuild your life. Don't you dare blame yourself for not knowing something we all conspired to hide from you." Outside, the city lights blurred through Monica's tears as she tried to process the magnitude of her mother's revelation. Somewhere in Atlanta, maybe in one of those gleaming towers downtown, was a family who knew what had really happened that night, a family powerful enough to erase official records and silence witnesses. And possibly, somewhere in that same city, was the brother she'd mourned for over 2 decades. At that exact moment, Benjamin Crawford stood beside a weathered roadside memorial on Highway 285, his headlights illuminating the plastic flowers and faded photographs left by other grieving families. The spot where the Williams family had died was marked by a simple white cross with 4 names etched in black letters. But as Benjamin knelt beside the memorial, more memories surfaced with devastating clarity. He remembered now. The dinner party his parents had dragged him to. The argument in the car afterward. His father drinking too much and insisting on driving home despite Benjamin's protests. The rain had started just as they'd taken the highway entrance, and his father's reaction time had been fatally slow when the Williams sedan had hydroplaned directly into their path. The collision had been unavoidable, but what happened afterward was pure Crawford family damage control. Private ambulances, private hospitals, private investigators to ensure that no inconvenient questions were asked about William Crawford's blood alcohol level that night. "I tried to save them," Benjamin whispered to the memorial, his voice breaking. "I pulled the girl out first, then tried to get to the others, but the car caught fire and—" His knees gave out as the final memory hit him. The little boy in the back seat, conscious but trapped, David Williams, maybe 8 or 9 years old, crying for his sister as Benjamin fought desperately to free him from the twisted metal. The boy had pressed something into Benjamin's hand just before the firefighters arrived, a silver pendant, identical to the one his sister wore. "Keep it safe," the boy had whispered. "Give it back to Monica. Tell her I'm okay." But Benjamin had been unconscious when they'd loaded David into a different ambulance, and by the time he'd awakened in his private hospital room, his father had made it clear that the Williams family was a closed chapter in their lives. Standing now beside their memorial, Benjamin understood the full scope of his father's cover-up. The Crawford family hadn't just hidden their involvement in the accident. They'd stolen a child, separating the last 2 members of the Williams family to protect their own reputation. David Williams was alive somewhere, had been alive all these years, and Monica had no idea her brother had survived. As Benjamin drove back toward the city, his phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Board meeting moved to 8 a.m. The Hartwell merger closes tomorrow. Don't be late." But for the first time in his life, Benjamin Crawford had something more important than business on his mind. Justice had been delayed for 23 years, But it didn't have to be denied forever. The question was, how do you tell a woman you've never really met that everything she believed about the worst night of her life was a lie, and that the brother she'd mourned was stolen from her by your own family? Some conversations required more courage than money could buy, and Benjamin was about to discover just how much he was willing to risk to make things right. How far would you go to uncover a family secret that could destroy everything you've built? Let us know in the comments what you think Benjamin should do next. The Crawford Industries boardroom buzzed with the quiet efficiency of a multi-million-dollar deal closing. 23 floors above Atlanta's financial district, the city's most powerful executives gathered around the mahogany conference table, their signatures worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. Benjamin sat at his father's right hand, mechanically reviewing merger documents, while his mind raced with plans he couldn't share with anyone in that room. The Hartwell acquisition will increase our portfolio by 40%, William Crawford announced to the assembled board members. This represents the largest expansion in Crawford Industries history. Applause rippled around the table, but Benjamin barely heard it. Hidden in his briefcase was a manila folder containing 23 years of lies, and sitting in his jacket pocket was a cell phone with Monica Williams' address, information that had cost him 3 sleepless nights and favors he'd never thought he'd need to call in. Benjamin will be leading the integration process, his father continued, his steel blue eyes finding his son across the table. I trust everyone will give him their full support. More nods, more smiles, more handshakes, sealing deals built on the foundation of power and privilege. But all Benjamin could think about was a young woman counting pills in a run-down apartment, unaware that her brother might still be alive. If there's no further business, William said, checking his platinum watch, I believe we can adjourn. Actually, there is one more thing. Benjamin's voice cut through the comfortable murmur of ending conversation. Every head turned toward him, surprise registering on faces that rarely showed any emotion at all. William's expression didn't change, but Benjamin caught the slight tightening around his eyes. What is it, son? I need to discuss something with you privately. Benjamin's hands were steady as he gathered his papers, but his heart hammered against his ribs. It's about the Williams family. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several board members glanced between father and son, sensing undercurrents they couldn't understand. William's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. I'm sure that can wait until... No, it can't. Benjamin stood, his chair rolling back with more force than necessary. 23 years is long enough. William's face remained a mask of corporate composure, but Benjamin had learned to read the micro-expressions that betrayed his father's thoughts. Fear flickered behind the steel blue eyes, quickly replaced by calculation. Board meeting adjourned, William announced, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. Everyone out, now. The exodus was swift and silent. Within moments, only father and son remained in the boardroom, separated by more than just the polished expanse of mahogany between them. You've been investigating, William said. It wasn't a question. I remember everything now. Benjamin opened his briefcase and withdrew the folder, spreading photographs and documents across the table like evidence in a trial. The accident, the cover-up, David Williams. William's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating coldness that had always lurked beneath his paternal facade. That boy died in the crash, just like the rest of his family. No, he didn't. Benjamin slid the hospital records across the table. He was transferred to a private facility. You made sure of that. The question is, where is he now? Dead and buried, along with that chapter of our lives. William's voice carried the finality of a closing argument. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, Benjamin. The family has moved on. The family? Benjamin's laugh held no humor. You mean Monica Williams, the girl who's been working double shifts as a waitress, thinking her brother died 23 years ago. That family. William stood slowly, his imposing frame casting shadows across the conference table. You have no idea what you're playing with, son. The Williams situation required complex solutions, solutions that protected this family's interests. Protected us from what? A drunk driving charge? A lawsuit? Benjamin's voice rose despite his efforts to remain calm. You separated two orphaned siblings to save your reputation. I saved this company. I saved our family name. I saved your future. William moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Do you think any of this exists by accident? The money, the power, the respect? It requires difficult decisions. It requires destroying innocent lives. It requires understanding that some people matter more than others. William turned back to face his son, his expression hardening into something Benjamin had never seen before. The Williams girl is a waitress, Benjamin, a nobody. Her brother was placed in a good home with a stable family. They've both had better lives than they would have had otherwise. You don't get to decide that. Benjamin's hands clenched into fists. You don't get to play God with other people's families. I get to protect my family by any means necessary. William's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. And you're going to stop this investigation right now, or you'll discover just how far I'm willing to go to protect what we've built. The threat hung in the air between them like poison gas. Benjamin had heard rumors over the years about his father's methods, but had always assumed they were exaggerations told by jealous competitors. Now, looking into William Crawford's eyes, he realized that the man who'd raised him was capable of far worse things than drunk driving cover-ups. Where is David Williams? Benjamin asked quietly. Dead to his sister, that's all that matters. Where is he? William studied his son for a long moment, then reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a thick file. David Williams legally became David Morrison in 5. He was adopted by one of our subsidiary company's executives, a couple who couldn't have children and asked no inconvenient questions about his background. He's 33 years old now, a successful architect in Charleston, married with 2 children of his own. Benjamin's hands shook as he opened the file, revealing photographs of a man who bore a striking resemblance to Monica Williams. Same dark eyes, same determined jawline, same quiet strength that seemed to radiate from the pictures of him with his adopted family. He has no memory of the accident, William continued. The trauma, combined with some medical intervention, ensured that David Morrison has no recollection of being David Williams. He's happy, successful, and completely unaware that his sister exists. Medical intervention? The words tasted like ash in Benjamin's mouth. Nothing permanent, just enough to help a traumatized child move forward with his life. William's tone suggested he was discussing the weather. It was a kindness, really. Benjamin stared at the photographs, his father's casual admission of medical manipulation hitting him like physical blows. They hadn't just separated the siblings, they'd stolen David's memories, his identity, his connection to the only family he had left. I'm going to tell her, Benjamin said finally. I'm going to tell Monica Williams that her brother is alive. No, you're not. William's voice carried the absolute authority of a man accustomed to obedience. Because if you do, David Morrison's world will be destroyed. His wife, his children, his entire life, all of it built on a foundation that you'll be tearing apart. Is your guilt worth destroying 4 innocent lives? The question hit its mark. Benjamin looked again at the photographs of David's family, his wife laughing at some shared joke, his children playing in what appeared to be their backyard. They looked happy, genuinely content with their lives. And Monica? Benjamin asked. What about her right to know her brother survived? Monica Williams made her choices. She could have worked harder, made better decisions, built a different life. Instead, she's chosen to remain in poverty, caring for a dying old woman and blaming the world for her problems. William's casual cruelty was breathtaking. Some people are meant to serve others, Benjamin. It's the natural order. Something inside Benjamin's chest snapped like an overstretched cable. All his life, he'd tried to earn his father's approval, to prove himself worthy of the Crawford name and fortune. But looking at William now, he realized that earning this man's respect would require becoming a monster. I'm resigning from the company, Benjamin said quietly. Effective immediately. William's laugh was genuinely amused. With what money? Everything you have is tied to Crawford Industries. Your trust fund, your investments, your penthouse, all of it requires your continued cooperation. Then I'll start over. As what? You've never worked a real job in your life. You've never struggled for anything. You think you'll survive in the real world without the Crawford name protecting you? William shook his head with mock sympathy. You'll be broken within 6 months, crawling back here begging for forgiveness. Benjamin stood, straightening his tie with deliberate calm. Maybe, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. You're making a mistake that will destroy everything we've built together. We didn't build anything together, Benjamin replied, heading toward the door. You built an empire on other people's suffering, and I was too blind to see it. If you walk out that door, there's no coming back. I'll cut you off completely. You'll have nothing. Benjamin paused at the threshold, looking back at the man who'd shaped his entire worldview for 34 years. Then I'll finally have something in common with Monica Williams. The elevator ride to the ground floor felt like descending from one world into another. By the time Benjamin reached his car, his phone was already buzzing with calls from board members, probably orchestrated by his father to pressure him into reconsidering. He turned the phone off and drove toward East Atlanta, toward a conversation that would change 2 lives forever. Monica Williams had no idea that her entire understanding of her family's tragedy was about to be rewritten, or that the millionaire who'd defended her at Meridian Club was carrying secrets that could reunite her with the brother she'd mourned for 23 years. But as Benjamin navigated the unfamiliar streets of Monica's neighborhood, he knew that some truths were worth losing everything to tell, even if the consequences would ripple through more lives than he could possibly imagine. The moment of truth had finally arrived, and there would be no going back for any of them. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Monica's small apartment as she sat beside Grandma Rose's bed, holding her grandmother's frail hand while the oxygen machine hummed its mechanical lullaby. 3 days had passed since Monica had learned the truth about David, 3 days of sleepless nights spent staring at her mother's letter and wondering if her brother was somewhere in the city, living a life that didn't include any memory of his sister. "You should eat something, baby girl," Rose whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. The medication was keeping her comfortable, but they both knew it was a temporary reprieve. Without the chemotherapy treatments they couldn't afford, time was running out. Monica squeezed her grandmother's hand gently. "I'm not hungry, Grandma." "Lying to a dying woman is a sin," Rose said with a weak smile. "Besides, I can hear your stomach growling from here." Before Monica could respond, 3 sharp knocks echoed from the front door. She frowned. They weren't expecting anyone, and the building's security door usually kept strangers away. Monica rose reluctantly, checking the peephole to see a tall white man in an expensive suit standing in the hallway, his dark hair damp from the rain. She recognized him immediately, even though she'd only seen him briefly at Meridian Club. Benjamin Crawford looked different somehow, younger, more vulnerable, as if the weight of wealth and privilege had been lifted from his shoulders. "Miss Williams?" His voice carried through the thin door. "My name is Benjamin Crawford. I need to speak with you about your family, about the night your parents died." Monica's hand froze on the deadbolt. After 23 years of silence, the universe was suddenly full of revelations about that terrible night. "What could you possibly know about my family?" "I was there," Benjamin said simply. "I was in the other car." The world tilted sideways. Monica fumbled with the locks, her hands shaking as she opened the door to face the man who'd witnessed the worst night of her life. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his steel-blue eyes, the careful way he held himself as if preparing for a blow. "May I come in? What I have to tell you, it's complicated." Monica stepped aside, her mind racing. The small apartment felt even smaller with Benjamin's presence filling the living room. He looked around at the second-hand furniture, the overdue bills stacked on the coffee table, the medication bottles that told their own story of financial desperation, but his expression held no judgment, only a deep sadness that seemed to match her own. "Grandma Rose is sleeping," Monica said quietly, closing the bedroom door. "Whatever you need to say, please just say it." Benjamin reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila folder, his movements careful and deliberate. "Before I show you this, I need you to know that I just learned the truth myself 3 days ago. My father, my family. They've been lying to me my entire life." He spread photographs and documents across her kitchen table, Police reports, hospital records, adoption papers. Monica's hands trembled as she recognized names and dates from her mother's letter. "Your brother David didn't die in the crash," Benjamin said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. "He was taken from the hospital while you were in surgery. My father arranged for him to be adopted by another family, and they made sure he wouldn't remember you or your parents." Monica sank into a chair, the pendant around her neck suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Made sure how? Medical intervention, nothing permanent, but enough to block his memories of the trauma. Benjamin's jaw clenched. They told him his birth parents died when he was very young, too young to remember. He has no idea you exist. The photographs showed a man who looked achingly familiar. David's eyes in an adult face, David's smile shining from pictures of a wedding, a graduation, family barbecues. He looked happy, genuinely content with his life as David Morrison, successful architect, loving husband, and father. "Where is he?" Monica whispered. "Charleston. He's married, has 2 children. His adopted family raised him well, gave him every opportunity." Benjamin's voice cracked slightly. "He has a good life, Monica, a life that would be completely destroyed if he learned the truth." Monica stared at the photographs, tears streaming down her face as 23 years of grief warred with the impossible joy of knowing David was alive. "His children? They're my niece and nephew. Sophia is 8, Michael is 6. Benjamin pointed to a photograph of David pushing a young girl on a swing while a little boy waited his turn. "They think their grandfather died before they were born. They have no idea about you, about Rose, about any of this." The weight of the revelation settled over Monica like a physical force. Her brother was alive, had been alive all these years while she'd mourned him, but approaching him would mean destroying the only family he'd ever known he had. "Why are you telling me this?" Monica asked finally. "Your family went to enormous lengths to keep this secret. You could have just let it stay buried." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "Because 3 days ago, I discovered that everything I thought I knew about my life was built on other people's suffering. My father didn't just cover up a drunk driving accident. He tore apart what was left of your family to protect our reputation. I can't live with that knowledge and do nothing." "But telling me doesn't change anything," Monica said bitterly. "I still can't afford my grandmother's treatment. I still can't find a job that pays enough to survive. And now I know my brother is alive but unreachable, which somehow hurts worse than thinking he was dead." Benjamin reached into his jacket again and withdrew a certified check, placing it carefully on the table beside the photographs. Monica's eyes widened at the number of zeros, enough to cover Rose's treatment, their rent for years, maybe even a chance to go back to school. "This is from my personal account," Benjamin said. "Not the company, not my father. Money I earned through investments that are completely separate from Crawford Industries." "I can't take this," Monica said immediately. This is charity." "No, it's justice. It's 23 years overdue, but it's what should have happened from the beginning." Benjamin leaned forward, his eyes intense. "My family destroyed yours to protect themselves. The least I can do is try to give you back some of what was stolen." Monica stared at the check, her mind reeling. The amount would change everything. Rose could get her treatments. They could move to a better apartment. Monica could finish her degree and build the life her mother had dreamed of for her. But accepting it felt like admitting that money could somehow balance the scales of what the Crawford family had taken. "There's something else," Benjamin said quietly. "I've arranged for you to receive copies of everything. All the records my father tried to bury, all the evidence of what really happened that night. If you ever decide you want to pursue legal action against your own family." "They're not my family anymore. I resigned from Crawford Industries this morning, cut all ties." Benjamin's smile was sad but genuine. "Turns out there are some things more important than money and power." Before Monica could respond, a weak voice called from the bedroom. "Monica? Baby, who's out there with you?" Monica wiped her tears and stood. "Someone who knew Mama and Daddy, Grandma. I'll be right there." She paused at the bedroom door, looking back at Benjamin. Would you like to meet her? She's the only family I have left, and I think she'd want to thank you for finally telling us the truth." Benjamin nodded, following Monica into the small bedroom where Rose lay propped up against pillows, her dark eyes still sharp despite her physical frailty. She studied Benjamin with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades reading people's character in their faces. "You're the boy from that night," Rose said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am, I tried to help, but—" "You were just a child yourself," Rose interrupted gently. "I can see it in your eyes, the guilt you've been carrying. Let it go, son. What happened to my family wasn't your fault." Benjamin's composure finally cracked. He knelt beside Rose's bed, tears flowing freely as 23 years of buried trauma and guilt poured out of him. "I should have done more. I should have fought harder to stay in touch, to make sure Monica was okay." "You were a child," Rose repeated firmly, "but you're a man now, and you're here trying to make things right. That's what matters." Monica watched in amazement as her dying grandmother comforted the man whose family had destroyed theirs. But perhaps that was Rose's greatest gift, the ability to see past hurt to the healing that lay on the other side of forgiveness. "There's something else," Benjamin said, composing himself. "About David. If you want to meet him, see him from a distance without disrupting his life. I could arrange that. He's planning to visit Atlanta next month for a conference. You could see for yourself that he's okay, that he's happy." Monica looked at Rose, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'd like that," Monica whispered. "Just to see him, to know he's real. And maybe someday," Rose added quietly, "when the time is right, there might be a way to let him know he has a sister who never stopped loving him. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday." Benjamin spent the next hour sharing everything he knew about David's life, his career, his marriage, his children, the man he'd become despite the trauma of his early years. Monica hung on every detail, slowly building a picture of the brother she'd lost and found again. As the evening wore on, and Rose drifted off to sleep, Monica walked Benjamin to the door. The rain had stopped, and the city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds beyond her small window. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for the truth, for the money, for giving me back my brother, even if I can't have him the way I want to." "Thank you for forgiving me," Benjamin replied, "for letting me try to make this right. What will you do now, without your family's company?" Benjamin smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, the expression reached his eyes. "Start over. Maybe learn what it's like to earn something instead of inheriting it. I hear there are some good community colleges in Atlanta. Maybe I'll finally figure out what I want to be when I grow up." Monica laughed despite everything, the sound surprising them both. "I was thinking about going back to school too. Nursing, maybe. I've gotten pretty good at taking care of people." "Maybe we'll end up in the same program," Benjamin said. Stranger things have happened. As he walked toward the elevator, Monica called after him. "Benjamin, that night when you pulled me out of the car, I remember someone holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. Was that you?" He turned back, his expression soft with memory. "You asked me to promise that someone would take care of your little brother. I told you I would." "You kept your promise," Monica said quietly, "just not the way either of us expected." After he left, Monica sat beside Rose's bed, holding her grandmother's hand and watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. The check lay on the kitchen table, along with photographs of the brother she'd mourned and found again. Tomorrow she would call Dr. Martinez and schedule Rose's treatments. Tomorrow she would start building the life her mother had dreamed of for her. But tonight, for the first time in 23 years, Monica Williams felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Outside, Benjamin Crawford drove through the streets of Atlanta, no longer seeing the city as a game board where money moved the pieces. Instead, he saw a place where broken things could be mended, where justice could bloom even after decades of winter, and where sometimes the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought. They could only be given freely, with an open heart, and the courage to do what was right. The pendant around Monica's neck caught the lamplight as she settled in for the night. its silver surface reflecting not just the past, but all the possibilities of the future. Some promises took 23 years to keep, but the best ones, the ones worth waiting for, were worth every moment of the wait. In Charleston, David Morrison tucked his children into bed, unaware that in Atlanta, a sister he didn't remember was looking at photographs of his family and planning for the day when they might find their way back to each other. Some stories end with dramatic reunions, but the best ones understand that healing happens slowly, that love can span decades of separation, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the time to discover the truth at their own pace. The Williams family had been broken but not destroyed, scattered but not lost. And in a world where money and power often seem to matter more than justice and love, their story stood as proof that some bonds are stronger than any force that tries to break them. The rain had stopped, the city was quiet, and hope, that most precious and persistent of human emotions, had found its way home at last. What would you do if you discovered a life-changing family secret after decades of believing something else? Have you ever had to choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths? Share your thoughts below. Your story might inspire someone else who's facing their own moment of truth.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.